As I was playing Dragon Buster II this time, I came up with a theory about it. Now, I don't have any evidence, but all the pieces seem to fit. I think Dragon Buster II is an incomplete game. I think someone at Namco was attempting to make a roguelike, couldn't get any of the systems to really work, but there were just enough pieces there that Namco could put them together, add some interstitial animation, and get it on a cart as Dragon Buster II. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe their intention the entire time was to create a game where none of the systems worked properly or supported the gameplay. Still, I think I fit the available evidence. The original Dragon Buster was a side-scrolling action-adventure game that was ported to the Famicom at the height of its boom years. Even though it was hugely popular, the game really is not very good. Dragon Buster II has only the slightest connections to the original game. And this one's a Famicom original. It's not an arcade port like the first one. The game has a pretty good animation in this opening cutscene, and the text scroll explaining the backstory is entirely in English, or something resembling English closely enough. By the way, I hope you like the music here in the opening, because that's the only music in the game. When you start playing, you're presented with this overhead map of the world, and it tells you which locations have special items hidden in them. The rule is, forests have tomahawks. Weird translation choice there, but okay. Towers have fairies, graveyards have arrows, and caves have camels. There are 6 worlds like this, and your goal on each of them is to get to the dragon's cavern in the upper right and defeat the dragon there. You enter locations on the map by walking up to them and hitting select. And that takes you into a dungeon. Here you can run around, and if you press the B button, you'll fire an arrow. The arrows reflect off walls, and you can hit yourself with them. You can take 4 hits before you die, and your outfit changes color with each hit, going from blue to green to yellow to red. Most of the caverns will be blacked out, and you'll have to walk up to the edge of them to reveal what's there. Now, not only are these maps not randomized, they are all reused constantly. For the first 2 worlds, there is exactly 1 cave map, 1 graveyard map, 1 tower map, 1 tree map, and 1 dragon's lair map. The positions of the enemies aren't randomized, and neither is the position of the exit. And you'll have to go through these maps over and over and over again. Now, around this point, I expect you've noticed something about the dungeons. There's no enemies. Well, there are, but they're extremely rare. Basically, each dungeon has 1 type of large enemy, who for the first 2 worlds only attack at you. They do get ranged attacks in the 3rd world at least, and these enemies take multiple hits to destroy. There's also some small fry enemies who can steal items that are on the ground. But that enormous dungeon that you're wandering around might have 5 or 6 enemies in it total. The maps also loop indefinitely, so you can't just use the follow one wall rule to navigate them. What I'd recommend doing instead is treating the rooms like a grid pattern, and trying to complete rows and columns. You have a limited number of arrows, so you can't just walk around firing like crazy, even if you weren't likely to injure yourself. But if you poke your head into a graveyard every once in a while, it's not like you actually have to farm arrows. Killing the wizards in the towers cause them to drop fairies. Fairies will restore your health if you've been injured, or they go into your inventory if you're not. Collecting 4 fairies in your inventory grants you an extra life. Other drops you'll find in the dungeon are a shield that'll make you invulnerable for a short time, and give you some music in the game. And you'll find these fire arrows. They'll make the next 3 shots do extra damage. The other item to keep an eye out for in the dungeon is the exit key. It's also possible for an exit door to be dropped by a monster, but it's functionally identical to the regular exit door. You collect any of these dungeon items by walking on top of them and hitting A. In the dragon's lair, you'll find this pool that will turn blue after you defeat an enemy. It'll restore your health, and you can keep reusing it. The tomahawks don't appear in the dungeons themselves. Once you leave a forest dungeon by getting the key, going to the door, and hitting select to exit, The tomahawk appears on the overworld map for some reason. You collect it by hitting A, and use it by walking up to a forest and hitting B. That'll chop down the forest and make a path for you. The boss dragons all appear identical, except they each have a different vulnerable spot on their body that you have to hit. The only way I really got them consistently was by bouncing a shot off the walls. One thing to be aware of with these big enemy sprites is that you take damage by just touching them anywhere. That means you don't want to explore heading south because someone could appear where you're standing. In fact, enemies appearing right on top of you is a regular problem for Dragon Buster II. And if it's a small fry enemy, they may steal a bunch of your arrows as well as hurting you. Dragon Buster II has a password system that can take you back to the world you left off at, but you can't get that password at any time. You can only get it when you get a game over. I think by this point it's pretty obvious that Dragon Buster II is a real mess of a game. What little action there is pretty boring. The enemies move at the exact same rate that you do and charge straight at you, and there's too few of them to actually threaten you. There's no skill requirement in the action, and so they wind up making it more about luck. And then there's all of this exploration. A blacked out map only works if you don't know what's supposed to be there. By the time you finish the first region, you know where all the maps go. And it took me just under an hour to complete the first 2 regions. And that was after I decided to start rushing things. There's all this area to explore, but it all winds up being exactly the same, and there's no reward for doing any of it. I can see the outline of something that could be good here, but it feels like they threw it out the door with too little development, and everything half-finished. Of Namco's 2 Dragon games in April 1989, this is definitely the worst of them.